Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and if the news of corruption does not slow down in the United States of America, I am going to be so overwhelmed I'm going to have to do 3 or 4 videos a day. But don't worry, we're going to get to all of it, and I'm going to warn you, this video is going to piss you off because it pissed me off making it. But first I want to show you this. This is from Clinton Donnelly from CryptoTaxAudit.com, which is one of my sponsors. The link's in the very top of the description of this. Clinton Donnelly helps you with your crypto taxes, audit defense monthly membership. You can see some of the things you get with it: audit representation, crypto gain calculation, audit risk assessment, annual tax savings, strategic planning, early warning, audit monitoring, coverage for all possible years of the IRS can audit, tax debt and problem resolution services, I mean, this guy's like a crypto tax expert. So click on the link in the top of the description. I think there's a coupon code up there to get as I recall there is, to get a discount. All right, now John Deaton had put this out. This is important before we get going. Take the time, 20 seconds, to fill out the app. The message is filled in. It demands to know what was said in the meetings between Gary Gensler and FTX, okay? So now we know that FTX was meeting in Congress. They were meeting with the CFTC, the SEC, and Sam Bankman-Fried himself was in the White House more than once, I believe. So the question is, I understand he was some big donor to Joe Biden, but what was he getting, and what were they planning and meeting about in return for all this access, in return for those contributions? I think I'm having a gut feeling going off. And I said, now, the SEC involvement in ETHGATE was dirty. This FTX thing is much worse. Gary is right in the middle of it, but none of this matters if we have a Congress that tweets about their anger and once again lets the corruption go the way they did with ETHGATE. I'm talking to you, Tom Emmer. I'm talking to you, Patrick McHenry. I'm talking to you, Warren Davidson. You guys are supposed to be the good guys. So talk is cheap. And we're going to go further on that if these guys don't start standing up and doing something about this. Now, I want to show you this. This guy had an interesting tweet here, but I like the first part of it the best. Okay, rare serious post for a minute, because I have a bunch of non-anti-crypto followers and I'm getting lots of DMs. The FTX collapse will be punished as a failure of crypto. It was not. It was and is a failure of an opaque shadow bank. Folks, everything I'm seeing, what I am seeing is a government colluding with FTX to create something. We haven't gotten to the total bottom of it, but not for 2 seconds can we now let FTX and that collapse that the U.S. government was involved in some way, we don't know yet, to let that same U.S. government then point at crypto and act like it's because of crypto. The guy that Sam Bankman-Fried was meeting with, Gary Gensler, was at the CFTC when MF Global went down with his buddy John Corzine and lost $100 billion. And for this Gary Gensler to now stand up here and act like this FTX thing, first, that he had nothing to do with it, he was meeting with them. For him to act like it has something to do with crypto instead of corruption is just further corruption, folks. And so that's why I want to bring this up. There's some kind of, it has a vibe of the U.S. government trying to set up some kind of a shadow bank and working with this Sam Bankman-Fried guy and intentionally letting him run it out of the Bahamas so they can throw their hands in the air. That's what this thing feels like. Now, let me give you my thoughts. A shadow bank that was meeting with the CFTC, SEC, and the White House and Congress, I forgot to mention that. It will be used by the same people to hold up as a failure of crypto. Do you see? I was born at night, but not last night, baby. And that is a Kid Rock quote from one of his songs. True story. Now, So right when these, and again, I wouldn't care if this was a this isn't about that. I wouldn't care if this was Donald Trump in the White House or anybody else. If this was going on, just like we did with Jay Clayton, if this was going on, we'd play the videos and we'd let it rip the same way. So all of a sudden, the second FTX collapses, in comes the White House. Regulation of cryptocurrencies is needed like it's an emergency. We've been kicking and screaming for regulation for how many years now? 10? This is them. Because remember, how a crypto billionaire decided to become one of Biden's biggest donors. So now it's an emergency because they don't want everybody looking into this.
Without proper oversight, cryptocurrencies, it risks harming everyday Americans. So this is something that clearly we monitor and that we see as an important issue. But the most recent news further underscores these concerns and highlights why prudent regulation of cryptocurrencies is indeed needed. The White House, along with the relevant agencies, will again closely monitor the situation as it develops.
Okay, they're closely monitoring the situation. Okay, now that FTX has collapsed, but this is what was going on at the White House. While Ripple's getting sued, Library's getting sued, they're not being accused of anything fraudulent. Meanwhile, the White House, while those companies are in the middle of a lawsuit that's being headed up by Gary Gensler, who works for the White House, while that's being done, the same people are meeting with the guy who just defrauded people to the tune of $8 to $10 billion, apparently, or allegedly.
I'm hearing that, someone in the crypto industry who folks might know as Sam Bankman-Fried, CEO of FTX, he's making some visits to the White House. Tell me about it.
Hey, good morning. So, yeah, back in May when Sam Bankman-Fried was in Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress about his company's bid to directly settle crypto derivatives trades, he made a couple stops at the White House alongside Mark Wetjen and Ilaria Katz, his policy chiefs, basically. They met with senior White House officials, including a counselor and a policy advisor, over the course of 3 days. 2 days, excuse me.
Does it help that he's the second largest donor to the Biden campaign?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, so we don't really know what he met these officials for. The White House visitor logs that were released yesterday only said that they met. It also interestingly noted that Bankman-Fried's brother, Gabriel Bankman-Fried, who heads a pandemic preparedness entity, also was present at one of these meetings. So, we can assume that maybe they talked about pandemic issues. Of course, Bankman-Fried bankrolled a House candidate earlier this year based on their pandemic positions, their thoughts on preparing for the next pandemic. But I think it would be safe to assume that the crypto issues came up as well, given that, Wetjen and Katz were there. So definitely seems to be, some effort to discuss with the White House, about these issues and about how perhaps, how to best regulate or just even, how to keep up with it.
Now, we said it for over a year, maybe 2 years now. Follow the money in ETHGATE. Well, right here is no different. Follow the money. The money leads to every single one of these bad guys, and that's what's great about the blockchain is you can track it. Now, speaking of bad guys, have you ever noticed that every time you see any of this stuff where Gary Gensler's involved, any of these bad guys are involved, it's always like an alley-oop's being thrown up, a setup, and then it's almost like somebody gets on the phone and says, "Hey, CNBC, Jim Cramer, can you do a little promo on this because we really want to help this person or company out?" Well, this was Jim Cramer with Sam Bankman-Fried a few months back. Watch this.
When I've read through your testimony, it's clear that you are not anti-regulation, but you do feel that this industry can pretty much regulate itself. And yet we know that there's scoundrels in the industry. Sam, kind of like Gresham's Law,
there's scoundrels in the industry. Not you. Other people.
How can you self-regulate, or should you just actually say to CFTC, CFTC regulate us?
I think it would make a ton of sense for, some combination of CFTC and SEC to regulate the crypto industry. I think they're already markets regulators. A lot of the regulation, frankly, ports over pretty cleanly to the crypto ecosystem. There are a lot of pretty nasty points right now in the regulatory framework that I think have to be worked out around where various assets qualify. But I think that at its core, markets regulation by the CFTC, I think asset issuance regulation by the SEC make a ton of sense for the industry.
Well, that does make you a bit of an outlier. I think there's some people in the industry who basically enjoy the fact that it's not regulated, which therefore makes it far more difficult for us old mainstream folks to want to go with.
All right, enough of that. Then, so to make matters worse, the guy who was responsible, him and Bill Hinman, responsible for ETHGATE, CNBC thinks it's a great idea to get him on to talk about the FTX fallout. And the whole reason we don't have regulation in the U.S. is because Jay Clayton was head of the SEC and did nothing about it for how many years? At least 1 or 2 or whatever, however long he was there. And now they let him come on to act like he's some innocent bystander and had and never could have done anything to help this industry. And now he's going to consult and inform the public about what went wrong.
Hey, Jay, just a couple things. One is, when you think about the long arm of the law, the trouble in this instance is the long arm of the law comes after the fact. Could you make a case to interstate wire fraud or something like that? Those typically are actually very easy to make, so then it's just an issue of jurisdiction and whatnot. To me, the larger question is how you get ahead and in front of these things. There's been this, intramural fighting going on between the SEC and the CFTC over even who has jurisdiction, what the laws should be, and why we don't even have.
I question that too. There's this fight between the SEC and the CFTC. Remember, in ETHGATE, they were both meeting with the Brooklyn Project and Joseph Lubin and Andrew Keys of Consensus. CFTC and SEC. In this case, FTX, they were both meeting. We've got them on record. We know that meeting with Gary Gensler and Sam Bankman-Fried, we've got Chris Giancarlo, ex-CFTC, Mark Wetjen, ex-CFTC, who was the regulatory affairs guy at FTX. This is not just the SEC, it's both of them that were working with this guy and that were working on the Ethereum free pass. And to say anything else is not true. Now, when they're talking in this, one thing I want you to take note of is listen to how Jay tries to walk him away from the idea that they could go after FTX. I think that that's going to be the next mantra. You're going to say, oh, we can't go after FTX because they know if they go after him, this guy knows where all the bodies are buried, this Sam Bankman-Fried guy.
All the rules and regulations in place that we need. My fear, actually, which mirrors Brian Armstrong's fear, is rather than actually try to get some laws that make sense, that bring people into the fold of wanting to do business in the U.S., we actually do the opposite. And the truth is Binance, FTX, and so many of these others are offshore, and they're offshore for a reason. What do we have to do?
They're offshore because of you, Jay.
Platforms to actually be operating in the U.S. and operating in a way that everybody feels good about.
Well, look, Andrew, if the reason they're offshore is because their activities can't comply with the basics of U.S. financial regulation, well, that ought to tell you something. But I don't believe, and look, I don't believe that's the whole story.
Apparently they can comply, Jay, because you guys were meeting with Joseph Lubin from the Brooklyn Project and Consensus. You guys were meeting with them on a regular basis, your people. The current SEC was meeting with FTX. Apparently only certain people, there's only 2 people I know of as I sit here who have been able to apparently successfully go in and come in and talk to us. And that's Sam Bankman-Fried and freaking Joseph Lubin. Okay? And Gary Gensler was meeting with Jay Clayton right around the time he dropped that lawsuit on Ripple too. Don't forget that.
Are there tokenized, digitized products that are suitable to be offered broadly in the United States? I think so, and I think they're coming. So it does go to your question: how do we accommodate that within what I would say is our extremely rigorous regulatory system, and we're going to have to do so incrementally.
Yeah. Well,
you can't.
My question is, how long are y'all going to talk about it? Man, these government people make me sick. How long are you going to? When are you going to quit talking and do something? What? These people wouldn't last 2 minutes in my world where we have to make actual decisions to feed our family. This is a joke. These people are getting paid on the government dole and then going into Goldman Sachs and getting paid millions for doing their bidding in the government or whatever. And then but they can't make a decision to save their life. And it's probably intentional because they're being told not to make a decision, by the way.
But Jay, here's the thing I can't figure out, Jay. Everyone, like Grayscale wants to have, a Bitcoin ETF. That might make sense, except for the fact that you have then these other operators who are operating outside of the United States that have such a massive impact on the price, perhaps, of said ETF. So you could have a regulated ETF in the U.S. on one end, except that the true impact is on something you can't regulate on the other.
That is, and Andrew, that is one of the reasons why it had taken so long for an ETF to be approved in the first place.
This guy makes me want to throw up. Now, this is a great thread from Fred Rispoli. Now listen, in the midst of all this FTX stuff that's been going on, all of the sudden, there are these motions to file, I think I'm saying it right, to file an amicus brief are being filed. There's been 2 or 3 that have been filed in the last day or two in support of the SEC, almost like a total desperation move. All right, but because these are companies that are supposedly coming out of nowhere that, oh yeah, we just want to support the SEC. Yeah, right. Okay. So, but Fred Rispoli, I think he lays it out right here very nicely. This is interesting. The NEIS is one of the companies that did this. The NEIS amicus is really interesting to me for a few reasons. First, as pointed out, this entity has no involvement in crypto at all. Looking at its history, it really only gets involved in cases as amicus when sports gambling issues are at play. So why is it getting involved here? Pointed to this person, let me see if I follow them. They pointed to a complaint by the SEC against the NSEI. I looked it up. NSEI just settled in September with the only issue left to be determined is to get this, how much money they need to pay the SEC. Everything else in that case is pushed way out until late 2023. Second, the law firm that filed the amicus is not the same firm representing NSEI in its SEC lawsuit. Amicus counsel office is literally across the street from the SEC, and it appears a number of attorneys there have ties to the SEC. Third, in my opinion, the brief, which is actually well written, even if the argument is wrong, truly reads like it was ghost written by the SEC. Ghost briefs happen all the time, by the way. Now, this is the interesting part. Lastly, or it's one of the main interesting part. Lastly, I think this brief leaks the SEC's endgame, which I coincidentally said just a couple of weeks ago, right on page 28. I think this SEC is begging the court, realizing it is losing, to at least be explicit in limiting its holding to XRP only and not use general language that could more easily be applied to the wider crypto universe, thus giving the SEC more of its coveted flexibility to pursue other projects. Or I'm desperately trying to divine a deeper meaning. Anyway, I think the gist of what he's saying, now he's not saying it and I'm not either, but it's almost as if the SEC is putting up some of these companies to put these up in to throw out ideas for the way that the judge could resolve this and resolve it favorably for XRP holders, but get the SEC out of it so that it doesn't prevent them from going after everybody else. That is what I'm reading through this. And I'm not an attorney, but I sure do. That's what I'm seeing. I'm going to stop there. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and tell your friends and family that I think Fred Rispoli is over the target, and I love what he's talking about, a ghost written brief. Boom. Thanks for